Good evening and welcome to Black Mental Health is Black Health. I'm your host, Bronwyn Lucas, and tonight we have three very special guests. If you were here last week, we just had to continue. It was too much to end in one 45-minute session, but we've added another very special guest to the conversation. But as always, we're going to start with some deep breathing. Why? Because the breathing allows you to calm your mind, body, soul, and spirit. And to talk with tonight, we're talking about violence in youth. We need to be a little more calm. We may have to breathe in the middle of this just to manage this topic because it's quite a topic. So, if you've never been with me before, we take in 3 deep breaths to the count of 4, in 4 and out 4. And you want to breathe. So if you put your hands lightly on your stomach, you want to breathe in so deeply you can feel your stomach expand. That means that air is not stopping at your chest, but it's going all the way, filling up your lungs, going into your brain, and really allowing your body to calm down. So let's do that practice. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. One more in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. I have to get one good breath in myself. So, as I said, we are here to continue talking about the last week. The focus was on just the school year, but we noticed there's so much violence going on that we wanted to talk about violence in our youth. And one thing I can say is that our society has become increasingly violent. It is impacting our youth. It is impacting us. It is impacting everything we think, say, feel, and do. So we wanted to address that in terms of our mental health and in terms of just looking at children and how that's youth and children and how that's impacting them. Um, so what one of the reasons I wanted to really focus on this, I have lots and lots of clients who are really managing this, not managing our current world and violence. If they were already dealing with anxiety, the anxiety has increased. You people in Buffalo went to the grocery store and they were killed. Shopping while black was deadly. People, families at a 4th of July parade dead, and there was more than one. I believe I saw somewhere there were like 5 different incidents across the country where people went to parades just to shoot. So a lot of people are just anxious about going outside. Here in Arlington, where I live, at one point the mall was closed down. Teens couldn't go to the mall without a parent because of a big, huge fight that took place. And then they describe it as a brawl that took place in the mall. So teens are banned from the mall because these were all teens. How does this impact our mental health? It impacts it greatly on so many levels, and that's what we're going to look at tonight. So I'm going to ask our guest, even those from last week, to introduce themselves. And the question I have for you is, why is it important for you to? Why do you think I chose you and wanted you to be part of this conversation? Why is it important for you to be a part of this? And Kanetra, we'll start with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kanetra Cooper, and I feel that I was invited to be a part of this because I'm the star of the show. No, I'm just kidding. Um,
You go,
actually,
girl.
I'm the star behind Queen Bee, Miss B. Um, I do feel like that I have a very holistic view on understanding children in different types of settings. And with my educational background, I've been in education 12 going on 13 years. But prior to that career change, I worked with the youth quite a bit. And so I have a passion and a desire. I actually really love kids. And so With those things coupled together, I think I can provide some pretty um, profound perspectives on the topics for today.
Nykki, we're going to save our new guest for last. Nykki, why is it important for you to be a part of this conversation?
Hi, my name is Nykki Williams Shola, and I've been an educator for 26 years in many capacities. And so I think that bringing the experience of being a former child abuse investigator, a counselor, a school teacher, just working in as administrative capacities, that I have a pulse. I have my hand on the pulse of what's going on with young people. So I believe
Awesome.
that's why you invited me.
All good answers. Ashlyn, last but not least, our parent.
Yes, so my name is Ashlyn Samuels, and I have five children ranging in ages from 16 to 9. And so I think that that is the main reason that I've been invited. I don't have like a background in education, but I have been rearing children, of course, in multiple age groups for quite some time, and ranging from elementary to soon to be junior high and high school. I think that it gives me more of an insight or a personal perspective sometimes to what's going on so many different levels, and I guess so many multiple educational levels as a parent who has to respond to the different needs and fears of children of all ages.
Most definitely. And you guys are all correct, because I thought it would be good to have a parent perspective. It's a good thing to have. Kanetra and I were speaking, reviewing, this morning, and she brought up Ashley, and I was like, oh my gosh, that would be awesome. And she has parent kids in different ages, so a lot to hear. So
You're welcome, Ashlyn.
Thank you.
you can blame her. I'm putting you on the spot in the last minute, and I thank you for stepping up to the plate, because, as I said, it's different. And since you ended last, Ashlyn, I'm going to start with you. How do you define violence? And let me explain what I mean to the audience. When I talk to them individually, they had a different perspective on what violence is in the schools. And we're looking at violence in youth, violence in the schools, and I'm expanding that to just even in the community, specifically to youth. So, how do you see violence, the problem of violence?
um, I guess to kind of define it, I would say it would be like the willful act or desire to destroy either one another or the community that surrounds us.
Oh, wait a minute,
Um,
girl. Say that again. That was deep. Say that one more time so my
uh,
audience can hear that.
Yeah, so the ability or the willingness to want to destroy either one another or the community that surrounds us. And so I see violence as just not amongst each other, but also amongst our culture and what we stand for and the stability of us as a people. And so
Mhm.
I believe that violence in the community is just an outward expression of the war that's going on inside of us. And when that spills out or spills over, that's kind of when we see the acts that are befalling the youth and pretty much anywhere around us. Issues
Mm,
of the heart.
awesome. Nykki, how do you define violence? Or how do you see it in the schools?
You asked me that question. I had many thoughts. So what I did is I had to go and actually just look at a definition so I could. So it says behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone. And so I see violence in so many different ways. And, we had talked previously, and the first thing I thought about was sexual assault. But now, when I think about that, I just think about the violence that's going on in our world, the violence of not having enough food, not having health care, or it's just so many things that can define violence in our life right now that we never really thought about. But it's anything that's to hurt, damage, or kill. So that just opened up my mind just little bit wider.
Kanetra, thank you. Nykki, Kanetra.
So, of course, all very, very amazing perspectives, and I did the same thing Nykki did, and I was just thinking about it. And one of the things that sticks out to me when it comes to violence is this any intent, whether it's psychological, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's cultural, um, or sexual, any harm or any actions intended to destroy one's character or oneself. And so, a lot of times we don't think about violence also being deflected upon ourselves. So we can be violent to ourselves. And so I think that that kind of brings me to the thought of Black health is mental health, because that's also a part of we're being violent toward ourselves when we're not taking care of ourselves as well. And so I think it's any intent that is the sole purpose is to destroy or to harm or to make less they than it is. And so that's kind of how I see it.
Awesome definitions.
Yeah.
And I see all of them, they really all fit together. You know, that willingness to destroy those around us. Anything that we're not doing, anything that can damage us, and that anything being brought into not just the a fight or something that's physical, is pointed out. Um, you know, living in a food desert, not taking care of your own mental health is violence against yourself. Awesome, awesome definitions. Um, what can you tell me, enlightening the audience about violence in the schools? One of the things that I know um, is that the not everybody realizes what's going on in the schools. I will share one incident, and you know we're not using names of schools or anything, but there was a school here in Arlington. This is more than one where this has happened. One where at one day there were 5 fights going on at one time. And it happened to be February 1st. And the student group I was talking to said what impacted them, not just the fact that it was so many fights going on in one town, everybody looking like us. And it was the first day of Black History Month. And she was like, that's something not right with that. We don't have it right. Now, she was involved in the fights, mind you. But she had enough sense to know we don't have it right. She was on the outskirts of it, but ready to jump in, wanted to jump in and go be part of it. But she realized they don't have it right. Um, what are Kanetra? I'll let you go first this time. What are some things you're seeing, or what can you relate that you know about fights at schools in the last year or so, or violence on campus, I should say?
I think one of the things that stuck out to me is that um, the quickness for children to result to violence in order to handle conflict. And for the most part, we know that we have the social emotional issues because we had COVID, kids were at home, they weren't interacting. There was not a whole lot of social interaction going on with students. And so you put them back into a setting where there's not just brother and sister or family, but there's a multitude of different types of students from different backgrounds and just from different walks of life. And so what stuck out to me is it's as if there was a button pushed that's the first thing you do. I want to physically lash out. And so I really think that it showed me as an educator that a lot of time that kids and even adults, they don't know how to handle conflict or emotion. And so not being able to articulate emotion, not being able to verbally share what is going on and how you're feeling, and having those tools in order to communicate that effectively and efficiently really just increase this is what we're going to do. And so that was one of the things that I saw. And it's kind of like nobody knows me, so I have to make a name for myself, because I didn't see most of these people, and some of them are coming from elementary to middle school where everybody, so it's like I have to kind of make a name for myself and show everybody who I am. So that was one of the things that I noticed.
And unfortunately, the making a name for yourself was through violence. One of the things I want to add, that I think that social skills are one of the collateral damages of COVID.
Yes.
And by that I mean everybody was, when you look at the lockdown part of COVID, so everybody was home, and like you say, they were home with family
Mhm.
or adults by themselves, or maybe one parent, one child, but you weren't interacting with people, and we were
Mhm.
shut down for a minute, and a lot of people didn't send their kids back that last 6 weeks when schools were, oh, they can come back. Like, no, just keep it, because
Mhm.
mine didn't go back either. So it's like my child had the option. He was like, if I've been home for 5 out of 6 weeks, it's too late to change something. And so, and a lot of parents who weren't feeling safe with them going back, so soon. So you had kids who had a whole year of no real social interaction, because during the real lockdown part, restaurants were closed, parks were closed, you couldn't go anywhere.
Mhm.
So you learned how to get along better with your family, or worse, but as you stated, you didn't have a lot of people to interact with. So you go for this extended period of time where you're not interacting with people. Then you go back to where there are, like, our high schools here in Arlington have 3,000 plus kids in them, or close to 3,000 kids in a building. And so now you go from 5 to 3,000, and all these 3,000 weren't really interacting, and you're literally bumped into each other in the halls during passing periods, literally. So you take all that in, and I don't even know how to be around these people, this many people anymore. And we have lost a lot of social skills, and in society as a whole, I don't think we've addressed that. Adults had those same issues in going back to work. Not that they were fighting, but that knowing, how do I got to interact with all these people. If you work at a big company and you're in the office, people who work in cubicles, and they're all this, and you got all this noise. At home, you can control your noise, even if it was their children. You better be quiet because mama said so, because I'm working. Go to your room and close the door and do your schoolwork. All of those went on, and yes, it is totally um, changed the way we see this. And because we don't have coping skills, I think that adds to the violence. As you said, you put it so eloquently to say, and they had to make a name for themselves. We've found that that's a way to make a name for yourself. Not, in my opinion, a good name, but it definitely is how they see it. Nykki, what have you seen?
I've seen a lot of social media violence, kids filming each other, like you said, wanting to make a name for themselves, increased fighting in the restroom, and it being videotaped, videotape for World Star, videotape um, just for the different types of challenges that were going around. And so I saw violence increase uh, even toward teachers, because at one point TikTok had, I think it was back in October or November, a teacher, and steal from a teacher, and so it was just a lot of violence. They had all these pranks, they have all these challenges, and so they're perpetrating violence on each other, and it's a prank, but it's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt. And so when you're pranking someone, um, then it turns into violence. And so it's just a lot of, I see the social media aspect of it, and I see the aspect of we had an increase in sexual violence, sexual violence in just touching people, running up and just grabbing people, touching people, or sexual violence that was truly sexual assault. And so saw quite a bit of that this last year. And I work at a high school. I work at a 11 and 12 campus. So we're talking about kids who are adults now, 16, 17, 18 and up. So I did see a lot of that.
Mm. Ashlyn, as a parent, what have your kids told you? They're on campus. What have you heard?
I think it's the caliber of these fights. I think the level of violence that they're willing to go to now to make the names for themselves, and the amount of damage that they can inflict on one another is the clout that they chase. And so this stuff is comparative to those of, like, fights in the yard, in prison, stuff that you would, you know what I'm saying, get put in a hole for. This is the stuff that my kids are seeing. My kids are, you know what I'm saying, bobbing and weaving and dodging and running and not knowing which way to run, but making sure that on certain days they have on tennis shoes and you know what I'm saying, they have their backpacks tightened up a little bit tighter and they are, you know, head on a swivel, you know, kind of on some PTSD type stuff a little bit because you just don't know what's coming, you don't know where it's coming from, and then the fact that you don't have to personally have the beef, but by association, you may have beef. So just because you're walking with a person, or y'all are cool, or you didn't want to have a mutual enemy, so then you became the enemy too. And so I think that now it's just so extensive. It's to the point where these kids are not fighting like we were back in the day. You know what I'm saying? It might be a schoolyard fight. These kids are fighting to kill, and they're making permanent decisions on temporary feelings, not realizing that you can be mad at somebody one day, y'all can be cool the next, but you know, you mess around and you hit somebody the wrong way, they fall, you kill them. That could be the rest of your natural life. You know, you haven't even seen graduation, let alone what God may have for you in the future, and you're already confined to a cell, and this is your reality. And I don't think that a lot of these kids realize that when they do things of that nature and they go to jail, their family goes too. It's just
Mhm.
not a decision you make.
Yeah.
It's everybody that's affected. You know, it's everybody's mama that's, you know, what they say, slow music singing and flower bringing. I mean, all of that. It may not be death to you, but it's death to whatever life you would have had. And so I just
Mhm.
don't think that um, they have real life ramifications or understandings for the level of violence that they want to in the name of respect. And I mean, once again, that's kind of like on a prison vibe anyway, because when they fight in there, they're fighting for respect. And so, in my mind, I'm thinking, are the children struggling with respecting and loving themselves? And so they're trying to find that in the other group of people. That's where we get the level of violence that they feel that they need. Because I mean, I've seen, you know, video from my kids' school, you know, and it's I mean, you don't know who's hitting who, you don't know who's grown and who's a kid. You don't know security from the real police. I mean, now you got you know, the police department there physically,
Mhm.
and so, I mean, it's becoming just massive. It's becoming crazy at this point.
And then one of the things I've talked to some of you about is just the weapons on campus. You know, when we think about weapons on campus, you think, oh, they have guns on campus. There are things they're using other than guns. Things that metal detectors won't pick up. Kanetra, you talked about some, was it rocks or coins in a sock? Could you tell them about that?
Absolutely. So, thank God I was not on campus this day, but a fight broke out on one of the campuses that I serviced, and the young lady brought a sock full of rocks, and that's what she used as a form of protection. And so, of course, in my mind, I'm trying to understand where did you get this from? So I think it goes back to what Ashlyn stated. A lot of it is perpetuated because they have been privy to those types of, you know, activities happening in prison. And so um, the other piece that really concerned me is that in order for a child, we're talking 13, 14, what, 15, I don't know, to bring something of that nature, the level of fear that that child must have possessed in order to feel like they needed something to protect themselves and they knew that they could not get their hands on a weapon or that that would be picked up. And so a student was the student was able to strike another student and made a very very serious laceration on the child's head. And so there's both sides of it. At the end of the day, the young lady had got word that some people were going to jump her. So in her mind, I'm going to sit and I'm going to swing because that's going to allow me to protect myself. And, you know, if they're coming at me from all angles, you know, I can't, they're going to. So this is what the young lady resulted to. But I was flabbergasted. I could not believe it. But then
Was
again,
this middle school or high school?
this was middle school. This was middle school. And so, The rocks were on the floor, and there was conversation that this young lady had been carrying this around all year. So, I just don't know where it comes from.
I'll make a comment on that. Who have I not asked about this? Ashlyn. No, what's the? I'm trying to remember. Because I'm just caught up in your answers, all of you.
Mhm.
Um, no, Nykki. I think we all talked about what's going on in the school. So I do want to comment. You look at where is this coming from. I think it's been a slippery slope for us to get to where we are, and COVID exacerbated the slope. It made it just muddy, and we're sliding down it. But we were seeing violence long before COVID. Violence in the schools. We were seeing the disrespect going, and the definition of respect. Because think about it. You've all talked about students using violence to gain respect.
Mhm.
Now, just stop and think. How do you define respect in that sense? By being more aggressive, by being more violent, by proving you're tougher. So, what does that say about self respect? Because if my respect is based on harming someone else, what does that say about how I feel about me as a person? These are questions I think about. And these are questions I've asked young teens and young adults who are just out of that teen but still in that, mentality. And I think their definition of respect is a little different. It's not, and where does self respect? Some of the answers I've gotten, and over the years I've worked with kids and gangs and that mentality by choice, because I'm like, we can save them, we're gonna pull them back in. And so that's why I chose to work with that population. And they don't mean it. I saw it, God, when I was last in an alternative school probably in 2008, 9. And one of the things you heard students say was, well, I'm not going to live to be 25 anyway, so I might as well take somebody out before I get taken out. Those were sentiments I've heard for kids involved in gang activity. And now that I'm seeing that sentiment just in kids in general. I first started working with gang kids back in 98. And that sentiment was there. But that was those who were really entrenched in, that gang mentality. These kids aren't. These are just your everyday run of the mill kids who are saying that. The other thing I want to share is that I'm seeing fear in kids that not they're feeling they won't live to be 25, not because of the life they lead and they're going to take somebody out, but they're fearful about going out. You look at what happened 4th of July. You look at what happened in the shooting in New York. You look at what happened we've had more than one shooting at churches. So I'm also seeing teens who are traumatized, and going outside is scary for them because you can go anywhere and get shot. And it's a hard one. It's a hard sell as a therapist to try to convince a teen or a 30-year-old why you should go outside. Um, what are you seeing? Are you seeing any of that fear or any of that hope? Let me start with the hopelessness first. I consider it a sense of hopelessness when I'm not going to live to be 25, so I might as well take out somebody, or I'm scared I won't live to be 25 because somebody will take me out, and I'll just be doing what I do. Are you seeing any of this fear, ladies? Nykki, are you seeing any of this fear?
Well, back in the day, they say you go to jail, you get three hots and a cot. And so looking at the food deserts and not having a place to live, looking at homelessness, prices are high, and there's just nothing, there's nothing to look for. The millennials are mad at the boomers, saying it's their fault because they can't find a job, they can't go to school, they don't have housing. And so you have many people who are on edge, just not just kids, but everybody is on edge because they don't know what tomorrow holds for them. And so sometimes, hey, going to jail might be a better place for you. And so I see sometimes that mentality, but the other mentality that I see is that the adults as role models. And when we just look politically, a couple of years ago, everything was violent. Everything was spoken violently, everything was done violently, and you saw adults being mean to each other. And the more they could pull each other down, the more respect that they received, the more respect that they received for their party. And I just think that it's a reflection of society as a whole, because it was at one point just in our neighborhood, it was just in our culture, but now it's common to see everybody fighting on different avenues, on different channels, and it's not held to, oh, it's a brawl or it's a riot. It's controversy, it's conflict, it's everywhere. And I think that it's just basically indicative of society, of what's going on in society. And we have to look at society as a whole and how toxic society has become as a whole.
Ashlyn, what do you see? Do you see any hopelessness, or just how you see children feeling about what's going on?
I think I see it more so in my children's friends and things of that nature, because I know some of them will kind of adopt us as a family. And I think in my mind, we're not the Cosbys, but for them, they haven't necessarily seen that real reflection of Christ, I don't think. And so they're coming to terms with, okay, maybe there isn't a father in their home, but there's still somebody who there's a level of stability in it. And I think the kids are drawn to stability, whether they know it's stability or not. And so I know that a lot of them will open up and speak to me about issues that are going on at home. And it's unprovoked. It's just them talking. They feel like it's a free space. And I do see it. I can say that there have been more young males that have opened to me up to me about the hopelessness and just the issues of them not really knowing how to express themselves, so they revert to anger. And then the thought that nobody's listening. Their parents may come and go and things like that. They're being more tolerated than really reared. And so there's being the necessities provided at home, but no real human interaction. And so I think that the phone has raised a lot of kids. The TV, like Miss Nykki said, has raised a lot of kids. And I think that the more and more that we see media, a lot of kids weren't taught the difference between entertainment and real life. And so they're taking entertainment and
Amen.
intertwining the two. And I think at this point, this is kind of the crossover. This is the product of what we have and what we see. And if there's nobody there to negate it, there's no truth to negate it. There's no, pastoral figure, or there's no church home where you can go in and hear the word. Everything sounds like truth, especially when it agrees with you. And so I think that they're just hanging on and latching on to whatever they have in front of them and whoever will raise them. And unfortunately, we even have a more violent nature of parents. I see a lot of conflict perpetuated at home. Well, you better go beat her up, or you better finish it. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. I even see the parents getting in it, and before you know it, the mama's in there tussling in the principal office. They trying to get them APD, or you know what I'm saying, police department is out here trying to tackle the kids in the parking lot. They calling, cousins, nieces, nephews. People are showing up on the spot to create all out war, and it could have been because somebody stepped on somebody's shoe. So it's even with that. Like, I just think our priorities have been shaken up. And I think that we've been desensitized because we see so much violence in games and movies amongst one another. And I don't think that we see a whole lot of love. I don't, back in the day, people took care of each other. Your neighborhood, folks, the village really did raise the kids. You got caught out to that street life, folks were snatching you up. Anybody could, you know what I'm saying, get you. And nobody was offended about anybody really telling their kids anything. But nowadays, people are offended if you correct their children. And I'm like, how do you send a child to school? You can't get them to act right at home, but you don't want anybody to address their misbehavior at school either. So it's like, well, then where are
Man,
they taught to obey authority?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that when we get to the point where we don't um, we don't draw the line or help them understand that authority is authority no matter where you go, I think that that's where I see the hopelessness, and I see the the misbehaving, the violence, the different issues that we're seeing all the time. And like I said, this parents about as bad as the kids most of the time. So it's kind of hard to tell who started it.
And you do see parents coming in, jumping in, or you better taking them to the child's house to beat up the child. These are real incidents that have happened where the parent will drive to someone's house, tell their child to go in and beat up the person because they messed with them at school.
And if I can kind of chime in on that, because as Nykki was talking, and then Ashlyn definitely um, just further explain the situation. And I know the old saying is the apple don't fall far from the tree, or just look at what they're being raised at, or look at their parents, or look at, mama comes up to the school with half a string of clothes on, and all sorts of things of that nature. But um, you're absolutely right. There, for some reason, there is a population of parents that are encouraging this, and I was able to witness a child who I know that's not what her heart really wanted to do, but her parent instilled that and picked her up from being suspended and said, when the bell ring, I'm taking you back. And the mom did that. And it's kind of like, so for a student who really has issues, let's just say anger issues, coping issues, and they are aware, hey, I know I have these issues, and yet now my mom is pushing me to react to situations in a certain way. And I know that because of my personal struggles, that I am going to reach a point of no return. So now mom has egged me on. I have engaged into this altercation, and I'm literally blacked out. Like, I am trying to, like Ashley said, I'm trying to pull blood and I'm trying to kill. And for parents, there are videos with the parents. You're absolutely right. Pushing people away, saying, "Don't break them up. No, you better beat up." And I'm like, "Baby, you won't. They got you on camera." And kids laying on the ground lifeless, and parents walking over, going at them. It just lets me know that we, as a nation, we already knew we were in trouble. But when I see that firsthand, how do we address that? How do we as educators deal with these kids in the classroom? How do we dare expect them to respect us when their daily dialogue with their parents, they saying a curse word every single word? Like, did you say a sentence that all of those words were curse words? How do you do that? It's amazing. But it is. The parents are definitely encouraging these kids, even to a point where the kids like, I didn't really want to go, but my mom, now I know back in the day, you get beat up and grandma, you better go, and I'm gonna watch. And I do remember that, me growing up, where my cousins would get into a fight, they checked everybody out of school but me. Everybody was going to the fight. So it's not something that's just, perpetually happening right now. I remember as a child, that's how it was. Oh, somebody hit you, let's go. Get your shoes. We finna walk down the street, and they aunties are gonna come out. So it just really saddens me that it's come to that, and now
And
people are going to jail.
but we're
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. What'd you say, Nykki?
and what and we do see that, and we did see that back in our time and in our generation, but now we see it. It's permeated. And I like what Ashlyn talked about, is that there's a lack of respect for authority. First of all, we used to respect police officers. We used to respect pastors. We used to respect politicians. But now people have done so much. There's a lack of respect any person, because who can you trust? And so there's that mistrust and distrust and just no respect, period. And so that's every culture now. And
Mhm.
that's the scary part, because there's no safe haven. And some cultures take things to the extreme,
Mhm.
and we pick up on those things, because we're used to fighting with our fists, but now we see guns, and it's a lot more. It's just a lot
Mhm.
more.
It is. We have changed. I want to make one comment that I can remember years ago when the show, and this only old people gonna get this reference. Sorry about that, but I'm gonna make it anyway. You can go back and research it. Back in the day, there was a show called Touched by an Angel that was on TV, and the
Mhm.
reason I'm making that analogy during that time, you had shows that generated positive energy, for lack of a thing. With Touched by an Angel, they were the angels that did all the good stuff. But they had controversial shows. They dealt with some of the same topics, they had on that show, but that God was a part of it. And every show, said God loves you. And that was a message.
Mhm.
During that time, then you began to have Judge Judy. Judge Judy's claim to fame was her rudeness in her court when you really think about it. And
Mhm.
I remember saying then, this is going to be the wave of the future where we're going from kindness to rudeness. And it ain't going to be pretty. And I really, that is what I'm seeing. We've gone, we did, when you talked about TV, we'll talk about the phone and social media, but even just in everyday TV now, there has to be a level of rudeness to make it work on so many shows. So TV is a part of it. The phone is even more important because the phone is their key to the world, and our whole world is violent. Our whole world is ah. I just can't imagine. I can't. There are no words to describe it. Rather, so yes, we've gone from a kinder society where we were. That's what you saw, and those images did make a difference. So you're going from, like I say, the Touched by an Angel. Those of you in younger, you can find it on YouTube or something. You'll see what I'm talking about. But it is a different type of show. So, you look at, I always like to say, and we're getting close to ending, but I always like to say, okay, if we present you the problem, we got to come up with some solutions. We got to come up with ending on a positive note. So, first thing I want to do, and I'm going to post it tonight, we are hosting, I have a nonprofit, Talk with Miss B, and one of the things we're doing is hosting a teen summit on violence. It's going to be virtual. So anyone in the country, any teen in the country can participate. If you are interested in um, sponsoring it, have a youth that you want to do it, it's going to be for children, middle school, high school, and those up to age 25. The 19 to 25-year-olds are going to facilitate groups for the middle school and high schoolers. So if you know anyone who is 12 to 25 and you think they would want to be a part, please, please, please give me a call at 682 272 3949. Again, anyone who wants to be a part of this, we're planning it now. Give me a call at 682 272 3949. After this broadcast, I'll post it on Facebook and you can find us. Um, that's one thing. And the goal of the conference is we'll have different groups of kids based on their age group, and each group is going to come up with one activity they can do as a group in their own area, one thing they can do to attack violence in their world. One thing. It can be small. It might be, I'm going to be the one that smiles and says hello to everybody. Whatever one small thing, because that can make a difference. So that's one thing we're looking at is letting children, I can't tell a 12-year-old what's going to impact their world. I was 1,200 years ago, so I can't tell you. But getting them, and we'll be there to facilitate, but getting them to do it, that's one thing. The other thing I'd say is by way of solution, tonight was all about saying, okay, this is a problem, it's a big problem. And I wanted everyone to be aware. That's why I have educators and parents talking about this is a big problem. Be willing to have conversations with young people in your life. If you don't have any children, grandchildren, niece, nephew, neighbors, go find one young child and have a conversation and share your knowledge, share with them, adopt that child into your life Like I said, it might be yours, it might be your child's friends, it might be your grandchildren, it might
Mhm.
be the neighbor. But begin to have conversations. I think part of our disconnect is we're not talking. There's always been the so-called generation gap. Now it's the boomers versus the millennials versus Gen Z. Back then, when boomers were young, the whatever generation, it's always been there. It's artificial. It really is. It doesn't have to be there. Have those generations, have those conversations. Because I do think each generation has failed somewhere in order for us to get where we are. But rather than focus on the failure, let's focus on, okay, what do we do now? Conversations. The motto of our nonprofit is changing the world one conversation at a time. Maybe it's your conversation that's going to change the life of somebody, but it's going to be repeated conversation. Okay, you don't have to have conversation with everybody. Get one person. If you change that one person, you change their sphere of influence. And as they change their sphere, those people in their sphere, they're changed. So that each one teach one, each one reach one really is true. And it can have exponential impact. But we're all have to be willing to have difficult conversations. And it can be very difficult because not everybody is going to take it. Maybe you are charged with talking to one of those parents who goes back to the fight, those parent who takes the sock full of rocks to their child. These are things that have really happened. I'm not making it up. Those parents who buy the guns, those parents who encourage it. Maybe it's not the child you are tasked to talk with, but the parent. And not in, I can't believe you did that. Find out what's going on. Love on them anyway. Maybe that's what's going on in their life, that lack of someone just to love them for who they are. Maybe I don't have self respect because no one ever respected me and I never knew what self respect was. So if I don't have self respect, I can't respect you. So be willing to step out of the bounds of your world and share something with someone in a positive way. In the last more than less than a minute, I'll ask each of you to have a final word, something you want to say. That's my final word, but Kanetra, what's your final word?
Um, I
I
think for the most part, my final word would be that we definitely need to, and I don't want to discriminate against anybody, but whoever you see as your higher power. For me, I'm a Christian, and so we really need to pray because I think that it is not a physical battle; it is definitely a spiritual battle. And as you can see, it's racing through the lineages of our ancestors, and I think that prayer is going to be our most powerful weapon in order to try and accommodate that. Because I'm gonna tell you, I did call that parent. I did have try to have a conversation, and it wasn't successful. But I did give it to God, and then I was able to have a conversation with the child. So when I could not reach that parent, I was successful when I pulled that child to the side and had a heart to heart. So that would be. I want you to know that I think the only reason why she didn't try to drag me is because I was covered by the blood when I approached the young lady. And so that would be my final word.
Nikki?
think that each person should think about how they interact in public, because right now we're so short tempered and I wish somebody would. But if we, like you said, if you just smile, if you're just friendly, if you remain calm and and not go off and be that example, you can maybe like a chain of smiles. People would begin to pass it forward if you were kind to someone who, just be aware of your surroundings and aware of how you're looking at people. Because sometimes I know I have that face. And so I have to be very careful sometimes in public not to, but hey, how you doing? Everything okay? Need any help? You need anything? As opposed to look at them kids. So, you know, along that line. If we would start with ourselves. Let's put it that way.
Mm, okay. Ashlyn.
Um, I think it would be to be a good listener. A lot of things that people are going through, they tell us we're just too busy to hear sometimes, whether it's children or adults. And so I think that even, sometimes, like Kanetra said, that's where my prayer requests come from. They don't necessarily come from what people tell me, but it's from what I hear when they
Mhm.
speak to me. And I think most of the time, there are a lot of outcries that we miss. There are a lot of moments that we can make kingdom moments. We don't hear it, or we're just moving too fast. So I would say, just taking that time to slow down and hear one another. And when somebody is intently upset, like you said, that's a chance to inquire. And when I hear you, I don't hear you to respond. I hear you to say, okay, I understand, and letting you be offended in that moment. I think allowing people to be offended and not telling them how to feel is another thing about it as well. But definitely be a good listener and be willing to take in the information and see the need in it.
Those were all excellent things. And I'll just say that really is my call to action. I'll end each show with a call to action. What can you do? Listen, take someone under your wing, uh, and be careful about, like you say, how you look. Smile. A smile is one thing that every time you give it away, you gain. You gain by doing it. Or and begin to practice those simple acts of kindness. Let's say you're in the grocery store and there's somebody with one of those electric carts and they're trying to get something off the shelf and they got to stand up to get it. Ask them what they want, give it to them, and move on. You're like, well, that's nothing. To that person, it's something. So begin to change your mindset and just begin to be kind. And then we can be that role model for the youth. Like I say, something simple like, oh, you need some help. What you trying to get? And you give it to them. Will that hurt you? No. So begin to, I challenge everyone who's listening now or who hears this to practice 3 acts of kindness in the next 7 days. And they can be simple. It might be smiling at somebody who's just looking down. Or it might be that parent who has a screaming child and everybody's looking at it, ooh, what is wrong with you? Even if you just go up and say, it's gonna be okay. You need help. Maybe if you don't say any help, you need help. It's gonna be okay. You're okay. Maybe that's the word they need to hear. So practice some act of kindness. And as always, I say vote, 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 and be an educated voter. We look at what's going on in our world right now, and part of it is because of the laws that are there now. So vote, 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 but be an educated voter. Just don't go vote because somebody told you to. Study yourself. Vote. We're coming up with midterm elections. It is so important to vote. And lastly, COVID is still here, y'all. It's still real. Real. Take care of yourself. So I will see you next week. As I said, this was for me. It was a very heavy topic. Uh, it's just very heavy for me. Maybe because I'm dealing with it with so many of my clients. It makes me sad when I see it. So my goal was not to make you feel as heavy as I feel, but hopefully there is some hope. And I do believe because of God, there is always going to be hope. So I will see you next week and thanks for joining. And ladies, Nykki, Kanetra, and Ashlyn, thank you so much for joining in.